Mercedes just won in Miami. And now the FIA is investigating them for a potential illegal trick. Not something obvious. Not something anyone saw during the race. Something hidden, that may have only activated in the exact moment they took the lead. And here's why this is massive. This comes from the same weekend where at least 9 penalties were issued, results were changed after the race ended, and drivers were punished for margins as small as a single line or just a few millimeters. So if Mercedes crossed that line, even slightly, this isn't just a win anymore. This could be the moment the entire championship turns upside down. At first, it didn't look like a problem for Mercedes. It looked like perfection. A clean race, controlled from the pit wall, executed with precision at every critical moment. Antonelli takes the win, extends his lead, and once again proves that this team isn't just fast. They're efficient, relentless, untouchable. On paper, everything checks out. But then, people started looking closer. Because Miami wasn't just another race. It was one of the most heavily scrutinized weekends of the entire season. Penalties everywhere. Investigations across multiple teams. Decisions made even after the race had already ended. That's when the environment changed. Because in a weekend like that, nothing escapes attention. Every detail gets checked. Every performance gets questioned. And that's exactly why Mercedes' victory started to feel different. Now think about the context. Every top team arrived in Miami pushing hard. Ferrari brought a massive upgrade package. McLaren showed clear improvements in race pace. Red Bull tried to recover lost ground. And Mercedes? Almost nothing. No major visible changes. No big development step. And yet, they still won. That's not impossible. But it's unusual. Because in modern Formula One, performance gains are usually visible. You can trace them. You can understand where they come from. Here, that explanation wasn't clear. And that's where the first doubts appear. Quiet at first. Inside engineering rooms. Inside data analysis. Because when one team finds performance others can't see, it doesn't go unnoticed. Now add the key moment. Lap 27. The undercut. Mercedes calls Antonelli in. Fresh tires. Clean air. And then, one lap that changes everything. A lap so effective that it flips the race completely. And that's where things start to feel uncomfortable. Because it wasn't just fast. It was too efficient. Too precise. Too perfect. And in Formula One, when something looks that perfect, it gets questioned. Not emotionally. Technically. Because rival teams don't just accept losing. They analyze it. Break it down. Compare data. And sometimes, they find something that doesn't fully match expectations. That's exactly what started happening after Miami. Because the performance in that phase of the race didn't completely align with what others were seeing from their own cars. Not enough to accuse. Not enough to prove anything. But enough to raise suspicion. And in Formula One, suspicion is where everything begins. And this is where the story takes a serious turn, because now it's no longer about how fast Mercedes was. It's about whether they were allowed to be that fast. Because once the FIA starts looking into something like this, they're not asking simple questions. They're asking very specific ones. Why did the car gain so much time on that exact lap? Why did the performance spike happen at the most critical moment of the race? Why did everything align perfectly, when it mattered most? Those questions are not random. They are targeted. Because the FIA isn't searching for something obvious. They're searching for something hidden. Something that operates in the background. Something that doesn't show itself all the time, only when the conditions are right. And that's where the idea of an illegal trick becomes dangerous. Because in modern Formula One, the biggest advantages aren't visible to the eye. They live inside systems. Energy deployment. Software behavior. How the car responds under very specific conditions. That's what gets analyzed. Telemetry data. Lap comparisons. Throttle application. Energy release on corner exit. Every detail gets broken down. Because if there's something unusual, it will appear there. Now connect this with what we already saw in Miami. Antonelli's race wasn't clean. He reported issues. Gearbox problems. Throttle inconsistencies. The kind of issues that normally cost you time immediately. But somehow, the performance didn't drop. He still delivered when it mattered most. That contradiction is exactly what raises questions. Because a car with problems shouldn't behave perfectly. Unless something is compensating. And that's the key point. The FIA isn't trying to prove guilt. They're trying to understand behavior. Why the car did what it did. And whether that behavior fits inside the rules. Now add another layer. Mercedes didn't show where their pace came from. No major upgrades. No visible changes. And yet, they execute the most decisive move of the race with absolute precision. That combination, unexplained performance, and perfect execution, is the exact trigger for an investigation. Because in Formula One, when something doesn't fully make sense, it gets checked. And when it gets checked at this level, nothing is ignored. Every system is questioned. Every advantage is analyzed. Every detail matters. And here's the most important part. They don't need to find something big. They just need to find something slightly outside the rules. Because in this sport, slightly is enough. We've already seen it all weekend. Penalties for the smallest margins. Decisions made after the race. Results changing hours later. Now imagine that same level of scrutiny applied directly to the race winner. That's the situation Mercedes is now facing. And that's why this isn't just a technical check anymore. It's a moment that could change everything. Because once the FIA starts asking these kinds of questions, there are only two possible outcomes. And both of them are massive. And now, this is where the entire situation explodes beyond just Mercedes. Because once the FIA opens a door like this, every team walks through it. Not publicly, but behind the scenes, aggressively. Because now the question isn't just what Mercedes did. It's what everyone else missed. And that's dangerous. Because in Formula One, the moment one team suspects another has found something extra, they don't wait. They act. Technical questions get filed. Clarifications get requested. Specific systems get challenged. And every one of those actions forces the FIA to go deeper. More inspections. More data analysis. More focus on areas that normally stay hidden. That's how a suspicion becomes pressure. And pressure becomes a full investigation. Now think about Mercedes in this moment. They're not just leading the championship. They're dominating it. Winning races. Building a gap. Controlling the narrative of the season. And now, every single detail of their car is under scrutiny. Not just from the FIA. From every rival team on the grid. That changes everything. Because even if they are completely within the rules, they now have to prove it. Over and over again. Every race. Every session. Every lap. And that kind of pressure affects performance. Because Formula One teams live at the limit. That's where speed comes from. But when you're being watched this closely, you can't push the same way. You hesitate. You double-check. You avoid risks. And that's exactly where lap time disappears. Now connect that with what's coming next. McLaren is getting closer. Ferrari is preparing major upgrades. Red Bull is still fighting to recover, but not far behind. And all of them are watching Mercedes. Waiting. Because if the FIA finds something, everything resets. The gap disappears. The dominance breaks. The championship opens instantly. But if the FIA finds nothing, if Mercedes passes every check, then something even more powerful happens. Their dominance becomes unquestionable. Because they didn't just win. They survived the highest level of scrutiny possible. And that's when a team becomes unstoppable. So now, everything is balanced on one outcome. One decision. One final answer. Because this isn't just about Miami anymore. It's about control of the entire season. And right now, Mercedes has everything. But they're also the team with the most to lose. Because in Formula One, the closer you get to perfection, the smaller the margin for error becomes. And sometimes, that margin is so small, you don't even see it, until it changes everything. And this is where everything finally connects, because this was never just about one lap, one undercut, or even one possible trick. It's about a pattern that Miami exposed in the clearest way possible. Look at it carefully. Mercedes wins again. Race after race, same result. But not with overwhelming dominance in every lap. Not with a car that is obviously faster everywhere. They win in moments. Precise moments. The exact second where the race flips. The exact lap where performance suddenly appears, and no one else can respond. That's what makes this different. Because in Formula One, consistency usually comes from clear superiority. Here, it comes from precision. And precision like that always gets examined. Now think about everything we've seen. A weekend full of penalties. Decisions made after the race ended. Margins so small, they had to be reviewed with extra footage and data. That's the environment Mercedes just won in. The most controlled. The most monitored. The most unforgiving. And still, they executed perfectly when it mattered most. That's what creates the tension. Because now, two ideas exist at the same time. Either Mercedes has found something extraordinary, completely within the rules. Or, they found something that sits right on the edge of them. And that edge is where everything breaks. Because Formula One doesn't tolerate gray areas for long. It defines them. It measures them. And eventually, it decides. That's exactly where we are now. Because this investigation isn't just about proving something illegal. It's about defining the limit itself. What is allowed? What isn't? And where that invisible line truly is. And here's the part that changes everything. Because once that line is defined, everyone adapts. If Mercedes is cleared, every other team will try to copy what they're doing. Push in the same direction. Chase the same advantage. And suddenly, the entire grid shifts. But if they're not cleared, if the FIA finds even the smallest irregularity, then that line becomes a wall. And Mercedes hits it first. Hard. Because in Formula 1, being the closest to the limit means two things. You're either the smartest team on the grid, or the first one to go too far. There's no middle ground. So now, everything depends on what the FIA decides next. Because that decision won't just explain Miami. It will define the future of the season. And maybe even the direction of the sport itself. So in the end, the real story isn't whether Mercedes used something illegal. It's what happens when the sport decides where the limit truly is. Because once that happens, there's no going back. And the team that built its advantage on that limit will either dominate the season, or lose everything in a single moment.